more chairs. Oh, that's good.
Where are you sitting?
Right up front. Yeah. I like to be able to hear. And then I'll get up and go to the back and take pictures so I can show how busy I am.
And then send it to my box.
I will. Okay, let's get started. Welcome everyone to the second Sunday Garden Forum 2026 presented by Project Green and the Iowa City Public Library. My name is Linda Schreiber and it is a pleasure to be with all my gardening friends again. My phenology report for today is that the spring equinox will fall on Friday, March 20th at 11:46 a.m. I want to be precise. This is the astronomical beginning of the spring season in the northern hemisphere and the fall season in the southern hemisphere. Now, before we get started, I want to remind audience members that our garden forums are free and open to the public, and attendance provides continuing education credit hours. We want to extend our thanks to Beth Fisher, Bondrager, whom you heard from, and the Iowa City Public Library staff for hosting the presentations and providing our presenters with technical assistance. Today's program is live streamed on the Iowa City Public Library's YouTube channel and can be viewed there at any time. Project Green was formed in 1968. Our nonprofit organization has devoted its resources to the environment and conservation practices, beautifying public green spaces, and educating the public. Our volunteers donated nearly 1,200 hours of service in Project Green Gardens in 2025. If you're a Project Green Garden volunteer, please stand to be recognized. I know you're out there. We retired our annual and very successful plant sale, and now we rely on financial contributions from the public to continue our work. Your service and financial support are greatly appreciated, and you can invest in Project Green in one of three ways. Online at our website, projectgreen.org. You can make a donation to the Community Foundation of Johnson County, to the Project Green Endowment Fund, or via the City of Iowa City Green Fund. Today, we're going to follow the format of our previous forums. Our speaker will present for 45 minutes to an hour. We'll take a break, enjoy a beverage, and we ask our in-house audience members to write out your questions at the clipboard during the break. We do this because our online audience members can't hear your questions without a microphone. So when we reconvene, our speaker will respond to your questions. So now take a moment and silence your cell phones. Today, I'm pleased to introduce a colleague, Kasey Hutchinson. She is Johnson County's Environmental Regulation Coordinator, ensuring that development in unincorporated areas meets the county's environmental standards. She represents the county on the Middle Watershed Management Authorities, advancing regional efforts to protect and restore water resources. Her background spans all levels of government and the private sector. When Dubuque Mowing to Monarch project that champions small native plant gardens was introduced to Johnson County, the concept quickly took root in the Department of Planning, Development, and Sustainability, and Kasey added Pocket Prairie Program Administration to her responsibilities as part of the county's soil health program, and she invited master gardeners to assist. A Lynn County program partnering with Monarch Research Station in Marion, Iowa, quickly followed that same year. Both programs are flourishing, and together the two counties have welcomed nearly 400 households since their launch. The decline of pollinators makes the stakes high and threatens Iowa's expanding local food systems. Pocket prairies strengthen ecological resilience, and foster healthier, more sustainable agricultural practices. The popularity of pocket prairies reflects a meaningful shift to recognize citizen action to create ecologically vibrant landscapes. Native plants offer benefits turf grass can't match: improved habitat, richer soil, cleaner water, and dramatically better support for pollinators, birds, and even homegrown food. As ecologist Doug Ptolemy would say, they help bring nature home. Please join me in welcoming Kasey Hutchinson.
Thank you for having me here today. As Linda mentioned, I'm the Environmental Regulations Coordinator with Johnson County Planning, Development, and Sustainability. My main role in that position is ensuring, as Linda noted, that developments that occur in the unincorporated area, or in other words, developments outside of all city limits, comply with our environmental regulations. And these deal specifically with stormwater management in sensitive areas such as woodlands, wetlands, prairies. And then I also get the pleasure to help develop and manage programs and initiatives that directly support the goals and missions of those environmental regulations. And one of these happens to be Johnson County Soil Health. So this is comprised of 3 programs, and the first one was started in 2022 with the creation of the Soil Quality Restoration Program. This parallels the existing city program of Coralville, North Liberty, and Iowa City. They have the Your Best Lawn program. This is simply a combination of aeration and application of compost to get much needed nutrients into your lawn. We run this as a cost share, so residents in the unincorporated areas and then the smaller communities that don't have access to an existing fund are eligible to participate, and we will reimburse 50% of the cost to do this in your yard up to a max of $2,000. The Pocket Prairie we started in 2024 in collaboration with the Master Gardeners. They've been a critical partner in this program, and what we do is we actually provide participants with free plants to create a native pocket. We started this, so we're going into our second season here. This is open to folks in the unincorporated area, but we're hoping to change that in the near future. So hopefully some of you are already eligible, and if you're not, maybe eligible in the near future. And then our third and final program is the county right-of-way soil sampling. This isn't for public participation, but what we do is we take soil samples in the right-of-way, we run some analyses, and the intent is to, over the long term, see how different land use practices affect soil health. Okay, so the reason that we have soil health in our department is because healthy soils are actually a form of natural infrastructure. So healthy soils can hold a ton of water, and that in turn is going to reduce runoff. If you can reduce runoff, you can reduce downstream erosion, flooding, pollutants getting to our waterways, and you can also help mitigate the impacts of drought. And oftentimes, environmental regulations are a direct response to loss of soil function or an effort to preserve it. So, for example, when our soils lose their function, they're not able to hold as much water, so we're going to have more runoff, more pollutants to our waterways, erosion, flooding, and so forth. And so then we have to have stormwater management, where we have to install things like detention basins, so we can capture that water and release that at a controlled rate so it doesn't cause that damage. When it comes to our sensitive or natural areas, I mentioned those are going to be areas like wetlands, prairies, woodlands, and so forth. These areas largely have undisturbed intact soils, so they're really high functioning. So we want to preserve all the benefits that these areas provide, as well as their high functioning soils. So what is soil? Well, simply, most of it is mineral particles. A good part of it is air and water, and then in the smallest proportion, but extremely important, is organic matter. So that's going to be once living material that is in different stages of decomposition. Additionally, soil is teeming with organisms, macro and micro. It's actually considered the most biologically diverse part of the earth. So there's an entire world going on underneath our feet that I think largely gets taken for granted. So I mentioned that the organic matter is extremely important. This is for many reasons. First, organic matter is responsible for holding soil particles together, so it creates nice porosity, so it allows the movement of air, water, organisms. I mentioned that it can hold a lot of water. It actually holds 10 to 20 times its weight in water. It is the nutrient supply for organisms and plants that call the soil home. It supports microbial diversity, and it also plays a key role in climate regulation. So it is basically a massive terrestrial carbon sink, storing more carbon than the atmosphere and plants combined. So I think most of us know that Iowa became a farm state because of its deep, rich topsoils. And prior to conventional farming, our topsoils were about 14 to 16 inches deep and had an organic matter content of 8 to 10%. This is really high. Now what we typically see is maybe 3 to 5% organic matter, 5 if we're lucky. And the reason that we have these super deep, rich topsoils is because of the native tallgrass prairie landscape. So these native plants have super extensive root systems that extend anywhere from 5 to 15 plus feet deep. This graphic here shows a variety of native plants and the relative depths of their roots. If you look on the very left, you can actually see turf grass, and so that root system doesn't even register on this graphic. So in addition to their root systems, their above ground plant mass and about a third of their root structure dies back every year. So this is a continuous supply of organic matter. So not only have we been degrading our soil, we've also been simply losing it. There are some estimates that put the rate of loss at about 1 inch every 25 years. And we know that it takes hundreds to thousands of years of chemical, biological, and physical weathering to create 1 inch of topsoil. So we have a huge imbalance here. So it's imperative that we take measures to both preserve the soils that we do have and improve them. So we know that native plants are a key tool in improving soil health, and they also provide so many other benefits. For one, they're resilient. They're adapted to local conditions, so they can withstand long, dry periods. They can, take wet periods. They help slow water down and infiltrate it because they create that nice porosity in the soil. Of course, they provide food and habitat for pollinators, other insects, and wildlife. They're a key they store carbon in their extensive root systems, and then, of course, I think we probably all share the thought that they're beautiful. So we want to use the Pocket Prairie program to help raise awareness of the importance of soil health, but we also want to use it to kind of be part of the shift in the way that people see beauty in their landscapes. So these pictures on the right, for example, I would say represent a traditional landscape. We've been told for so long that we have to get the leaves out of our yards, that they have to be weed-free. We have to scour our beds in the spring and the fall of all vegetative debris. We have to cut back our shrubs and our flowering perennials after they're done blooming. And the result is something like this, and this, as this article refers to it, it's a buzzkill. In fact, the article goes on to refer to landscapes like this as ecological dead zones because they don't provide any benefits. And so we want to see lawns that look something more like this. And, there's absolutely been a trend toward incorporating natives into your landscape, probably even over the past couple of decades. But part of continuing this trend, I think, is getting people to recognize the benefits of this and then, in turn, correlate the benefits with beauty. These are pictures that they're kind of blurry, sorry about that, but these are pictures that I've taken just walking around my neighborhood, a couple of just neighborhood lawns, and then the lawn on the right is actually our own city high. Okay, so why a pocket prairie? Well, sometimes people just need a place to start. So the Johnson County Pocket Prairie provides exactly that. It's an easy place to start. Pocket prairies obviously can also accommodate space constraints, so whether you have a nice big lawn to work with or you have like a really tight urban space, you can make a pocket prairie work for you. And another thing to keep in mind, even small pockets provide great benefits. Oftentimes they'll even provide like a vital pit stop for foraging or nesting insects. So the Pocket Prairie program that we manage and administer, as I mentioned, provides enough pollinator plants to our participants to create a roughly 100 square foot pollinator garden. That's pretty small, but it's a really easy place to start. We have 3 different mixes, pre-designed mixes that accommodate part sun, and then kind of part wet. All of our mixes consist of 8 flowering perennials and 2 grasses. Of course, a prairie is far more diverse than that, but this just provides a good place to start, knowing that you can incorporate diversity later on or expand it. Additionally, we try to start kind of easy because it might take time for people to get familiar with their plants and be able to identify them, so sometimes it just works better to start with fewer species. We do have a few requirements for program participation. As I mentioned earlier, currently you have to be a resident of the unincorporated area. We are hoping to change that. and you have to commit to 3 years of maintenance. The idea is that the input for maintenance is going to be greatest in the first 3 years, and after that, your gardens are going to be pretty self-sustaining. The program process is pretty straightforward, and I should note that we provide all of this information on our website, including like tips for preparing, planting, maintaining your plot. We have an online web form. If you are eligible for the program, you complete this when the program goes live. We set it to go live about July 1 every season. You do have to attend a mandatory August workshop, and we use that workshop to let participants know what they need to do to start prepping and planting their plots so that they're ready when the plants come in May. So we accept applications in July, August workshop to get people started, and then the plants actually get delivered the following May. So whether or not you're a participant of the Johnson County Pocket Prairie Program, there, I think, are some general resources that you can put to use. Of course, you have your existing programs. So Johnson County has their Pocket Prairie program, but Dubuque County has their Mowing to Monarchs. Lynn County has a program. Linda, do you know what they call that program? Yeah. Okay. But there are existing local programs that you can refer to. Also, you can rely on your local experts, whether they're city or a county conservation staff. Our own master gardeners, they're fantastic. Local landscapers and local growers. Here in Johnson County, we have Trout Leaf Nursery. They actually specialize in growing plants native to Johnson County. They're extremely knowledgeable, and they love sharing their expertise. Also, of course, you have your plant identifier apps that you can download to your phone. There are a couple of reasons I really like these. First, I've done this a lot in the past in Iowa City. Iowa City does a bang-up job with native plantings all throughout town. And when I see a native plant that I don't know what it is, then I can use my app to find out what it is so I can make sure I'm getting it into my gardens. Another reason I really like these is for maintenance purposes, getting started. Plants are going to look different during the different growing stages, and oftentimes while you're getting familiar with them, they might be hard to identify, especially when they're first emerging. So in the spring, you can use your app then to make sure that you're pulling weeds and not the plants that you want to actually keep in your garden. So I'm going to walk through some generally defined steps in creating a pocket prairie, starting with location selection all the way through post-planting practices, but then I'm going to also show some examples to illustrate these things. So for location selection, we recommend starting with a sunny spot if you're just getting started. Of course, there are natives that are suited to part shade and shade, but you'll have more options if you start with full sun. We recommend avoiding planting near large trees, and this is simply because oftentimes they have big, shallow roots, and it's really hard to plant in around them. We recommend not planting in the right-of-way, just because there's a chance that it might have to be taken up by you or somebody else in the future. And then, in the end, make it work for you. You might have like natural areas that are easy to be planted, like edges, like whether you have a fence or along the foundation of your house. And then look at your open spaces, but particularly open spaces that you don't use for something else. Like, for example, I have a green space that I have to keep open because I play catch with my daughter. Or there's like a space in our backyard that is the perfect spot for our vegetables. So I'm going to leave those alone, but I'm going to look for other areas where maybe all I'm doing with it is mowing. Now, when it comes to the design, there are just some general guidelines with shape. That really is like an aesthetic design preference. It can be any shape that you want. Now, where you select to put it might have influence on what you end up with. The size, like I said, we recommend starting small just to make it easy on you, but it really can be any size that you're comfortable managing. The plants or the area might dictate. So, for example, you might already have plants on hand that you want to use to create a garden. So you would just have to figure out, based on your intended spacing, how much space you need to accommodate those. Conversely, you might have an area that you know you want to plant in natives. And so you would just determine the square footage and figure out how many plants you need to fill that space. If you want a cleaner or tidier look, you'll want to go with a border. Also, I find that borders do a great job of preventing grass from encroaching into the bed. You can use a plastic or metal edging, of course, stones, pavers, bricks, and so forth. And then you might consider something like a pathway. I have a long linear garden in my yard, so instead of having to walk all the way around it, I just have like 4 stepping stones right across the short length of it. Plant selection. I call this wild card because it's simply for where it falls in the process. Because like I said, you might have plants that you know that you want to plant, or maybe you're starting with laying out your garden first, and then you're going to figure out what you're going to put in it. We recommend going with a mix of grasses, sedges, and flowering perennials, really to support as much diversity as possible, knowing that you can always add more later on. You might want to pay attention to your soil types, including soil moisture, but definitely light needs. Oftentimes, like I'll just kind of watch an area throughout the day to determine how many hours of sun it gets before I decide what I'm going to plant there. With these pocket prairies, you can go with plants or plugs because you're working with a much smaller area, and these will establish and fill in a lot quicker than using seed. You might want to consider height. So, for example, if you are planting right next to a sidewalk, you might not want to go with something that gets really tall. And you might also want to try to get a mix that has varying heights. And then finally, bloom period. We recommend trying to go with a mix that's going to provide you blossoms throughout the growing season from spring through fall. So with plant selection, there are so many options out there. Again, refer to your existing programs. We post our pre-designed mixes on our website, and I think the other county programs do as well. You can look around you, neighborhoods and cities. Like I said, Iowa City does a fantastic job. Of course, you have your traditional resources with books, magazines, and websites, our local experts like master gardeners. There are a lot of local plant sales. Oftentimes, these are put in concert with events that are focused on native planting. So, for example, Johnson County Conservation has a native plant speaker series, and those events always are combined with a plant sale. Trout Leaf Nursery has been at that plant sale, I think, maybe the past couple years. So that's a good opportunity. And then we have our online plant distributors, and they all have predefined mixes. So like even if you're not planning on purchasing from an online distributor, you can always find mixes to draw inspiration from. These examples here, you can see that they have a 32 and 64 plant pollinator garden. There's also examples of where they have mixes that are focused on pollinators generally, butterflies, monarchs, hummingbirds, songbirds. So you can at least use this to get some ideas of what plants to put together. Additionally, while you can, of course, find this information many different places, including just a simple Google search, these online retailers also always provide nice physical characteristic summaries of the plants. So here you can see that they obviously tell you the sun exposure, the height, the bloom colors if you want to go for a variety, and then the benefits. So this is handy when you're trying to figure out what plant mixes you want to put together. For the plot preparation, the key here is removing existing vegetation. There are two methods that we recommend. The first is smothering, so you just put down plastic or cardboard to kill off the vegetation. Usually you want to try to give yourself like a 2 to 3 month lead time. You might have some like clods of dead vegetation left behind, and you can just work that into your soil. The other method is mechanical removal. Of course, this is much more labor intensive. You're either going to use a garden spade to take up that turf or a sod cutter. And then there's finally the chemical method. We don't recommend this for pocket prairies because usually you're dealing with a small enough area where you can just take up or smother the sod. This would be more for like large areas that you're converting where you're going to probably plant seed instead of plants. There are some general design considerations. One suggestion is to place your grasses first, and then you can place your other plants around that. And keep in mind that you can use your grasses to help prop up floppy plants. And then also, grasses will, because of the root systems, will help keep some of the more aggressive spreaders in check as well. We recommend grouping into clusters. Not only does this help the blooms pop for aesthetic purposes, but it actually helps pollinators find them. I recently read on the Xerces Society website that a lot of pollinating bees will actually feed on a single species during a forage outing. And so if you keep a single species clustered instead of dispersing it throughout your landscape, it actually provides them a more efficient forage. We recommend, like if you have like a long linear garden, you can do clusters but in swaths. For spacing, for flowering perennials, we recommend 1 foot apart, grasses 1.5 to 2 feet apart, but of course this ultimately is going to depend on the species that you go with. And then for height, keep in mind that if you have a back to your garden, like a fence or a foundation, you can put your tall plants at the back. If it's like an open space garden, you want to keep those in the middle. And then with the shorter plants, you're going to keep those along the edge or the perimeter or the front of your garden. When it comes to watering, on here I have 2 to 3 times per week, but honestly, when I first plant, I water once every 1 to 2 days. And I do that for probably the first 3 weeks, and then I'll back it off, kind of depending on whether or not we're getting rain. Anymore, it seems like we're never getting rain when we need it. For the weeding, your garden's gonna look fantastic when you first plant it. One thing to note is then after you get it planted, the following growing season, those weeds are gonna come up so fast, and they're probably gonna come up before your plants do. So it's important to stay on top of the weeding, especially in that first growing season. You're gonna wanna mulch your garden. This will help retain moisture and keep the weeds at bay. And you can use something like leaves, straw, wood chips. You wanna mark your plants. I use utility flags. They're really unsightly, and a lot of people ask about them, but they work so well. Because like I mentioned, those weeds are gonna come in fast. They're probably gonna come up before your plants. So when I've used like the regular plant markers in the past, I have a hard time finding them. With utility flags, they stand up really nice and tall, and I don't have any problem finding my plants. And that will be a temporary thing. I'm gonna remove those after like the first 2 or 3 years. We recommend sprinkling up. Leave your plants throughout the fall. The branches and twigs of your plants are gonna provide critical habitat for hibernating pollinators, and also, food for winter wildlife as well. And you're also gonna wanna wait to clean up your beds, probably beyond the point of getting antsy in the spring. There are a lot of bee species that don't emerge until nighttime soil temperatures are reaching 50 degrees or greater. So you want to wait until after those bees have had a chance to emerge to clean up your beds. With critters, I'd say that generally native plants are fairly resistant to critters, but not when they're young and tender. So when you first plant your garden, you're probably going to want to protect those plants to give them a chance to establish before the critters can get to them. Okay, so we're going to get to some of the examples. I'm actually going to take you through a tour of my own yard to illustrate some of these things. So this is my backyard. I wouldn't actually call this an example of one of my, quote, pocket prairies, but it's an example of a space that lends itself really easily to incorporation of native plants. This is just a 2-tiered stone terrace. It's like 130 feet long. Both terraces are like 4 feet deep. It's fully contained. I can't do anything with it other than plant it. So it started off kind of like a mix of natives and non-natives of plants that I transplanted from my childhood yard, and I've just filled it in with natives since then. And I have a lot of areas like this in my yard, especially like around the foundation. I like evergreens for, year-long coverage, but then amongst those, I'll put in native shrubs and put in native plants wherever I can squeeze them in. So my husband and I decided that we wanted to take the turf grass that we're not doing anything with other than mowing and also convert those to natives. I found this honestly a bit overwhelming because we have a lot of space to work with. And when I have too many options, I find it really hard to make decisions. So over time, naturally, I decided that the only way I could get started was to start small. So I started back in 2023, that I would create a new pocket every growing season. So I started in the front yard because we have a lot of space in the front yard that's full sun. All of our mature trees were taken out by derecho. Actually, you can see like that brown stuff, we actually just completed SQR in this photo. So that's compost on top of the grass. There's a small tree to the left there. That is a small to medium tree at mature height. So what I did was I measured out the mature width of the canopy and made sure I didn't place my garden under that because I was planting a full sun garden. I don't want it to get shaded out over time. For the plot design, the nature of this obviously is a bit different than my backyard, and I personally wanted it to look a bit cleaner and tidier, so I went with an intentional design with a very well-defined border. For the shape, I actually just took out a super long garden hose, and I worked with it until I found a shape that I liked. And then I just used a garden spade and cut the border along the shape of that hose. For the plants, so I determined the rough square footage of this garden. It ended up being about 300 square feet. So I used that to figure out then how many plants I needed to purchase. I already knew the plants that I wanted, I just didn't know the numbers. Now with the plant selection, again, this first one was the hardest for me because there were so many plants that I like. So I found that I just wasn't able to make a decision until finally one day I was flipping through a magazine and I came across a photo of a garden that I thought was just beautiful. And it was a super simple mix of little bluestem, allium, and pale purple coneflower. So that's exactly what I went with for this first one. Again, knowing that I can incorporate more diversity later on. So for the plot preparation, I did mechanical removal because I never know what I'm doing soon enough to give enough lead time to go the smother route. And so I had to do this by hand. I did it over time, like when I get home from work and I'd maybe take up a few strips. So I just used a garden spade and then a flat-edged spade to take them up in strips and then put them in other places that could use it in my yard. My mom came down to help me plant this, and when she pulled in the driveway, I was removing the last strip. And that was my goal, was to have the sod removed by the time she got there. So for the layout, I took this one pretty seriously. I actually took twine and garden stakes, and I measured out 1 foot lines all the way down the length of the garden. And then along each line, I placed a flag 1 foot apart to mark where my plants were going to go. What I ended up doing was I kept the grasses in clusters, but mainly like made a swath throughout the length of the garden. And then I placed the little blue stem in clusters, or not the little blue stem, the pale purple coneflower in clusters around that. And then the alliums, since they're the shortest of the three, I placed those in clusters along the perimeter. And kind of the idea with the alliums, too, putting them along the edge, was that they seem to have done a pretty good job of kind of deterring the bunnies. So this is the first full growing season. You can see it came up pretty nicely. A lot of the pale purple coneflower didn't bloom this first season, but that's not unexpected. I did have a lot of open areas where the plants just haven't filled in yet. So that first year, I planted a number of annuals that pollinators like zinnias. And then I also planted marigolds all along the perimeter, again, to try to deter the bunnies. So the photos on the left are from just this past fall of 2025. Unfortunately, I took those photos after the pale purple coneflower were finished blooming, but you can see their heads in those photos. And then on the right, that's just this winter, January of 2026. You can see that I left everything standing throughout the winter, and I will leave it standing till late spring. And it adds some nice color and structure to the winter landscape, and also, like I said, provides that critical habitat. So this is my second planting, and again, we're in the front yard because I have a lot of space to work with. You can see my first pocket in the background there. With this one, I went the same route. I got out my garden hose and just worked with it till I found a shape that worked for me. With the plant selection, I already kind of knew what I wanted to plant. I just needed to figure out how much space I had to work with to figure out my numbers. In this garden, I have a lot of plants in here, which seems kind of odd because looking at this, it looks quite small. And I can't remember how big this garden is. But I have cream false indigo, purple prairie clover, rough blazing star, purple love grass, royal catchfly, butterfly milkweed, showy milkweed, and blue star. And all of these plants stayed really small. Actually this past season, they were even really small. So I'm expecting this next season that they're really going to explode. And again, with that one, I had to do mechanical removal of the sod. Okay, so this is my third and most recent planting. I did this in fall of 2025. This, again, is in the front yard. You can see that the edge of it kind of parallels that first pocket prairie. In this case, I've actually incorporated that small tree that I referred to earlier. So I know in this case that I'm going to have some part shade plants in this garden. I did approach this one a little bit differently because I already had all my plants on hand. So in the summer, I purchased a number of plants for fall delivery. And then I also attended one of the trout leaf nursery sales, and I purchased a bunch of flowering forbs and sedges and grasses. And so what I did is I took all my plants and I laid them out in combination with my hose till I found a combination that I liked. And then I replaced the plants with flags. And then when I went to take up my sod, with each strip, I would take the flag up, and then when I took up the strip, I'd put the flag right back down, so I wouldn't lose my configuration. Because for me, that's like what takes the longest in preparing these gardens. As I mentioned, or maybe I didn't. I had to go the mechanical route here again. It sneaks up on me every fall. I'll be like, oh my gosh, I haven't put in my garden for the season, so I'm looking at mechanical removal. The mechanical removal, like I said, is a lot of work, but at least you can prep your garden bed very quickly. For the planting, again, I kept my plants in clusters. In this case, I strayed away from spacing my plants 1 foot off center. That's how I've done the other gardens because then they fill in so much more quickly. But in this case, I had some plants that are just a little bit larger in stature. Like I have a number of blue false indigo, and that gets about 3 feet wide, so of course I had to give them a little bit more spacing. And then I kept the part shade plants, most of these were sedges and grasses, close to the tree, and then the full sun plants I clustered further away from the tree. And another reason that I decided to incorporate the tree in this case was because pollinators, maybe you've heard, like they appreciate a soft landing. They often find habitat underneath trees, so you want to try and leave the area underneath the trees undisturbed, and leave your leaf and vegetative litter for them. In this garden, I have a list here as well. So I have some copper-shouldered oval sedge, rough blazing star, prairie dropseed, blue false indigo, which I mentioned is one of those plants that gets a bit larger, fox sedge, rattlesnake master, yellow coneflower, lead plant, and New England aster. The great thing about having multiple beds is then when you move along through the evolution of these and you have too many plants to put in a bed, you can just tuck them other places. Okay, so this is just a photo of some of the grasses and the sedges that I purchased for this specific pocket prairie. Tyler Baird with the City of Iowa City gave a really good talk at the Native Plant Speaker Series at County Conservation, and convinced me that I needed to definitely get sedges into my landscape. I have a lot of prairie dropseed and little blue stems, so I also wanted to get some additional variety of grasses. So I think in this picture, those are kind of hard to see, but I know there's Virginia rye, palm sedge, side oats grama, Pennsylvania sedge, and plains oval sedge. And sedges are really nice because they're pretty versatile. There are sedges for full sun, there are sedges for part sun and wet. So no matter where you're planting, you can find a sedge that works for you. When it comes to the watering, like I said, I water pretty much every day for the first few weeks. But of course, this input, just like everything else, is going to drastically decrease, if not go away entirely, once you have your plants established. I don't think that I've watered this bed after the first planting season. And then kind of same with the weeding. I mean, in general, all the input is going to be in the first few years. You can see that these grasses have filled in pretty thick. So my weeding requirements have reduced drastically. I still have some open areas or where I've added plants that I'll stay on top of just to make sure that my new plants can get established and not get outcompeted by the weeds. But yeah, I don't have to do near as much weeding as I had to the first 2 years. With mulching, I actually use straw because it's cheap, it goes a long way, and it breaks down pretty quickly, adding organic matter to my gardens. And then I also supplement with leaves. I always mulch right after I plant, and then I will mulch in the winter as well. But I'll only do it where I need it. If the plants have filled in entirely, I'm not going to put mulch down. Now, I mentioned the utility flags. This is what you're seeing in this photo. I know that I have neighbors who ask neighbors what my flags are for. And the white flags represent the locations of the plants when I first established the garden, when I first plant the garden. And then you can see some orange utility flags. Those are in my first pocket prairie. The reason I use a different color is so I can essentially spot maintain my garden. So those plants, the orange marked plants, came along later in a different season. And so instead of watering my entire garden, I can just make sure that I'm watering where those orange flags are. All right, and I have a lot of critters in my yard, and I love them. I have so many bunnies and deer, but once my gardens are established, I don't care if they feed on them. I mean, there's enough to go around, but until then, until my plants get established, I've used different methods to protect my plants, and they've all worked. The first one, the photo on the left, I used T-post, and then I kind of used that silky netting. You can see it around that tree. I wrapped that around the entire perimeter of my garden. So that was like a 6-foot tall fence. Then the second garden, a different route, we used wood stakes, and then I put chicken wire around the wood stakes and just laid deer netting over top. In the third photo, another approach. I took the empty pots of the plants that I planted, and then I took garden staples and I actually secured them right next to the plants. So they stand a little taller than the plants themselves, and they don't touch the plants. And then I put deer netting over top, and then I used garden staples to secure it along the perimeter of the bed. So as I mentioned, I don't do any fall cleanup. And when I do spring cleanup, I wait as long as possible. And then when I do cut this back, I actually just hand mulch it back into my beds. I actually find it a really nice form of mental therapy. I've kind of applied this rule to myself that I can't let organic matter leave my yard. So everything is going to go back into my grass or my garden beds. The stuff that I can't put into my garden beds, like large branches, I just put in a pile that I refer to as my bunny hut. And I know that like the big branches and twigs and whatnot also provide habitat for pollinators. Okay, so I'm going to show you now a couple other maybe kind of accidental approaches in my yard. So this, you can see there's a cattle fence that we in the past have used for growing pumpkins, so the pumpkins can just vine up over that cattle fence. This past summer, I had dreams of creating a cut flower garden using annuals that pollinators like, so zinnias and cosmos. But I didn't get a single bloom because they'd get to be about 2 feet tall, and then the bunnies would come sniff them right at the midway section. And actually, in that photo on the right, my bunny hut is in the distance, so they probably appreciated that being, I'm hoping they live in there, so they had close proximity to a food source. But I decided that definitely wasn't going to work for this space. So I had some seed packets of native seed mixes at home, and so the night before one of the forecasted snows this winter, I just went and scattered them to do some winter seed sowing. If you're doing something like winter seed sowing, they recommend doing it anytime between like December and February, ideally right before snow. That snow provides an insulating blanket that also protects those seeds from being foraged by the birds. And then the freeze-thaw cycles will work them into the soil, and it will also give you your required cold stratification. So we'll see how well this works. I just did this. Okay, and this photo is also another slightly different approach. This area here, where you can see my flags, that's where I've planted a bunch of Pennsylvania sedge. Pennsylvania sedge likes part shade and shade conditions. This is truly a part shade area of my yard. Hopefully, eventually, it looks like the picture on the right. But what I'd like to do, like over time, is hopefully split these and just spread this out in this area and just let it go and let it serve as an alternative ground cover to turf grass. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some other pocket prairies from our actual pocket prairie program. So we are in year 2, which means that we have had 2 rounds of plot preparations and 1-year plantings. And so we, in the fall, go out and do plot inspections in cooperation with the master gardeners. And we're going out just to make sure that people are getting their beds prepped so that they're ready to plant when the plants come in the next spring. In this case, everybody used plastic to go the smother route, and they put a little weight on it. And then they'll just leave these in place and probably until they're ready to plant their garden in the spring when the plants come in. This will do a great job at keeping, weeds away. And if they do have dead vegetative clods, they can just work that right into their dirt. In these cases, they used cardboard, and you can see in a couple of those examples, they placed some wood chips over top. And I suspect that they'll just plant directly into that. The cardboard will be in place long enough by the time the plants come in, and will probably have been completely broken down. The top right photo, you can see they went with a little bit different shape to their garden. I think a lot of times with the Pocket Prairie program, it's easy to go with like linear lines because we also measure the plots to make sure that they have enough space. So they're looking to create roughly 100 square foot gardens. So it's easy with the nice clean lines to know that they have that adequate space for their plants. Here are a few more examples, cardboard on the left. In the middle, that's actually an example of chemical removal. And the reason they went with chemical removal in this case is because they will, of course, plant the plants they get through the Pocket Prairie program, but they're also creating a much larger garden than what the Pocket Prairie provides for them. So they'll purchase all their other plants, or most likely go with seed. And then the photo on the right, I liked this approach. They actually removed their turf and then planted a cover crop. And so that will help suppress weeds and provide organic matter. Some common cover crops that might be used for this purpose would be winter rye, oats, and clover. I don't remember what they planted in this example, and maybe somebody can identify it by photo, but I'm not sure what it is. Okay, and then these 3 photos are from our very first year participants. So they would have planted their gardens just this past spring, so May of 2025. Actually, our plants came in early June, so they would have planted these in June of 2025. That one in the middle, I'm surprised at how big their plants are this first season. They're coming in nicely on that picture, in the picture on the left as well. On the right, that garden has a bit shadier location than those other two photos. And you can see their plants are there. They're small, and that's not unusual for like the first 2 years, but I would expect that all of these would explode after year 3 or during year 3. And here we have a few more examples. All of these went with a little bit like triangular shape, and they've incorporated some other elements like the brick pavers to create their border, some large stones in that middle one, and a bird bath. All right, so those are some examples. So where do we go next? As I mentioned, you can start as simple as you want. Over time, if you haven't, you might want to try to incorporate some grasses and sedges and other flowering perennials just to increase your diversity. There are a lot of nice resources out there. So this is from the Xerces Society. They have some great plant references when you're trying to pick out your plants. So this, as well as those other examples that I showed, they'll give you your bloom time. I like the additional details column of this one because it'll show you like if they're resistant to pests and deer, what insects they really support, whether they're bees or butterflies. And also another consideration is to focus on incorporating keystone plants. So keystone plants are plants that are considered to provide disproportionately large benefits that support a vast number of insects. And this example that I pulled here, this is from the National Wildlife Federation. Of course, you can find all sorts of sources for keystone plant listings, but on this site, you can just enter your zip code, and it'll give you proper keystone plants for your area. And then you can also consider incorporating trees and shrubs. So this will just provide, more multi-season habitat. In my yard this year, I decided to focus on the rusty patch bumblebee. It is an endangered bee species, but it's been identified in Johnson County, and I know somebody who lives within the city limits of Iowa City who has spotted one in their yard. So I decided to focus on plants that I could incorporate to help expand the habitat in my yard for them. So like the woody species, I don't know if you can see that, I apologize, but the top woody species listed is serviceberry. It's a great spring provider for them. So that's exactly what I did. That tree in the foreground, that's a serviceberry that I just put in this year, and it's closely located to all my existing pocket prairies. Another thing that I wanted to share that I thought was kind of cool, and Linda actually turned me on to this, is the homegrown national parks, and you may have mentioned that during your introduction. But I believe Doug Tallamy started this, and he's an entomologist with the University of Delaware. And their push is to, obviously get people to incorporate natives into their yards and throughout their communities. They have a lot of nice resources on their website, including curated garden mixes that can give you ideas. They also have listings of keystone plants, and I like too that on this one you can actually you select if you're after like a tree, shrub, ground cover flower, and it's kind of cut off, but even like container plants to serve as keystone plants. And then they also have this biodiversity map, so you can get involved in this. So what they do, they're basically tracking the area of native plantings across the U.S. And if you're into competition, this map is actually shaded based on ranking. And the ranking is the proportion of the area of the total state that's been converted to natives. Iowa currently ranks as number 21. I had to do a lot of clicking around to find the number one. Does anybody want to guess who it is? California. Mm-hmm. East Coast. Mm-hmm. Delaware. Delaware currently leads the way. Of course, everybody is like, not even registering at 1% because you have to convert a lot. But if you want to show up on there, you can create an account, give your location, and then the square footage that you've converted to native plantings. Another thing we can do is keep learning and make, modifications and change our approaches as necessary. I actually just saw this in the Washington Post on Friday. Good news, we saved the bees. Bad news, we saved the wrong ones. So there was that big push to save honeybees, and people are great. They want to help, so people started taking up, keeping honeybee hives on their own properties and stuff. Unfortunately, it's been at the expense of our native bee populations because they outcompete the native bees for nectar and pollen, and they also introduce diseases into the populations. So the article recommended, of course, some of their favorite natives to incorporate into your landscape to help support these native bee populations. But one thing to think about as you're planting your gardens is to leave some bare patches, because they say that like 70% of native bee species are actually ground nesters. So you want to leave bare patches that they can get access to. So you can leave like loose vegetative matter, like leaves and debris. Don't put down wood mulch. They say that they cannot penetrate wood mulch. But another consideration when you're planting your gardens. And then what I like to do, I love walking around my yard in the summer and seeing what I can see in my gardens. It's amazing the number of insects that come visit. And I will note that bottom right-hand corner, that is a Cecropia moth caterpillar. So Cecropia is the largest native moth in North America. It has a 7-inch wingspan. I did not find that in my yard. I planted it. So County Conservation, this past summer, they asked, based on a certain native tree species, for people to adopt these eggs. And some of the tree species that they feed on are native lilac and cherry. And I had a bunch of those in my yard, so I said, yeah, I'll take some eggs. And so it's like nearly a year-long process to rear these. So they lived on my lilacs all summer long. I had to protect them with these organza bags. And I have 2 cocoons out there now, so hopefully they emerge successfully in the summer. But again, just another consideration, I mean, they're relying on native trees, so that's the only reason I could adopt these eggs. Okay, so here is my email address if you want to get in contact with me for any questions. Be sure to check back our website. I have the address there for any changes that we might make to the Pocket Prairie program. Like I said, we're hoping to expand eligibility beyond just the unincorporated residents. And of course, you can find all sorts of information at that website too.
We'll take a short break and write out your questions here at the front, and then we'll get back to you and give you an answer. Thank you. Oh. Okay, we're going to get started again. Our online viewers are watching the Iowa City Public Library's YouTube channel. Our online viewers are watching the Iowa City Public Library's YouTube channel of Project Green's Second Sunday Garden Forum. We're with Kasey Hutchinson, who is presenting Creating a Pocket Prairie in Your Landscape. And now Kasey's going to answer your questions. I want to make a couple of announcements. Judy Terry, our garden columnist, has her books available on the east side of the room. And we have an announcement about the Sequest barn.
So I have about 3 or 4 acres of free area on the east side of Johnson County that is open for free if anybody wants to have a garden out there. I've been restoring the Sequest 1883 octagonal barn for about 15 years with grants from the State Historical Society. I try to keep it as original as possible. I put in running water for planting, and there's also toilets. Everything, the water's turned off for the winter time, but it's open every day for free, and if you want to have a little garden out there, you're welcome to do that. There are some brochures over on the side with my email in there as well. So,
Tell us your name, please.
my name is Richard Tyler. Okay?
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
And Project Green would like to present our speaker with a hat that she can wear proudly. You answer the questions and then we'll do a drawing.
Okay. All right. Okay, so are there any opportunities for non-land owners to participate, like volunteer their help? And Linda, maybe you can help me answer some of these questions. So specifically with the county, we don't currently have like volunteer opportunities. When it comes to like the SQR or the Pocket Prairie program, you don't have to own your land per se, but you probably need permission from the landowner to participate. So that would be from the county side. And do you have other opportunities that you can share?
The city of Iowa City has lots of gardening spots. I see Marcia here. She can probably help me. Where they can plant gardens. Community garden program. And we can just find that on the City of Iowa City's website.
Usually they open up for registration like April.
Okay. Registration usually opens around April, the first part of spring. Check on the iowacity.gov.
Okay, do you incorporate compost into your beds prior to planting? I guess in a way I did with all my front beds because I had the soil quality restoration done, so the compost was spread throughout the entire yard. But I have not added additional compost. Again, I try to make the most out of the vegetative debris that I have in my lawn. Like I said, I don't let any of the organic matter leave. So I'm just trying to take like even though I know like my gardens would do well having compost added, I just don't do it. I just mulch everything back into it and try to work with what I have. And then the follow-up to that is, let's see.
That's my writing.
Oh, okay, yes. Okay, so this person lives in a subdivision where there's not much good topsoil, and that is absolutely an issue. Now, with the soil quality restoration program, the program that is like the combination of aeration and application of compost, everybody who lives in Johnson County has access to a program because if the city of Iowa City, North Liberty, and Coralville, they have their programs. So if you live in those communities, you're eligible for their programs, and so you can get that much-needed compost added to your lawn using the cost share. If you are not located in those communities, then you're eligible for the Johnson County program. So no matter where you live, you can take advantage of that. I had it done in my lawn. I live in the city of Iowa City, and I definitely noticed a difference. So I think it does help. And for our program, and I think the city programs are the same way, you can participate as many times as you want. It just has to be in different funding cycles. And then, Linda, did you have a follow-up to that? You said something about not...
Some time ago, the state developers met with the governor, and there was a question of whether or not the developers were going to have to put topsoil back on their subdivisions, and they thought that would be too expensive for homeowners, and so they made that decision not to. Fortunately, we live in Johnson County, or most of us do, and we have a soil restoration program. We have taken advantage of that where we live on the west side.
And then the next question is, false indigo spreads like crazy. How do you control it? I actually have not had that problem. I have some existing blue false indigo in other beds, and I've actually wanted it to spread, and it won't. So sometimes I feel like people have that issue. Like I have a bunch of like just common milkweed that I want to spread, and I've had 4 stalks for the past 6 years. So I can't help with that because mine does not spread. Do you have experience with spreading indigo?
No. We have a lot of milkweed, though. It just keeps spreading.
Yeah. Mike, please share.
Dig it up and trade it to someone else for another plant.
That's a good suggestion.
Good solution.
Okay, let's see. Dig it up and trade. Make a trade with somebody else for a different plant type. Any recommendations if your best candidate space with respect to sun is on a fairly steep hill? If it's a steep hill, I mean, so if I'm dealing with slopes, I'll usually try to make sure I'm incorporating grasses just because if you space them appropriately, they're going to really do a good job. They get thick clumps. They're going to do a good job of slowing runoff down. But I'm not sure then that there's anything that I would like avoid. So yeah, those thick mounds that you're going to get that are actually going to stick around all season long, like my little blue stem, I mean, those clumps are there throughout the entire year. Like my pale purple coneflower, that dies back all the way. So yeah, I think if you're incorporating plants that clump and they're going to provide some slowdown to that runoff, you can kind of come up with, I think, any mix that you would want to.
And that may be where you want to use your sedges
Yeah.
around the edge.
Yep. Oh, and another thing about the sedges and grasses that I don't think I remembered to mention, when I mentioned that a lot of the native bees, like the bare patches, that's where the sedges and grasses come in handy too, because they grow in clumps, and so there's like open space around them that the bees can access. My soil is very sandy. What is the best way to start improving it? Again, I would say do the SQR, add compost, hang on to your organic matter, keep it in your lawn. I mean, anymore when I see people raking their leaves to the curb, I'm like, no, don't do that. But yeah, I am amending it with compost, but going the natural way. And if you can improve your soil health with the addition of natural materials like compost, you don't have to apply any of the chemicals, and that's what we want to do, is stay away from the chemicals. What part of Iowa City do you live in with your pocket prairies? I actually live right next to City High. And there was somebody after a different talk who came up to me who lived in my neighborhood, and I didn't catch her name, but she had a really cool idea going where she was trying to like essentially create a corridor of pockets throughout our neighborhood, so get people talking and learning from each other and participating. I don't think she's out there, but I thought it was a really cool idea to like kind of work with your neighbors to try to create corridors of pockets. But yeah, that's where I am, and I have noticed that like in my neighborhood there are a lot of pockets. So the more we can create, the better, obviously. Okay. Want to kill turf grass on east-facing sloped area. How to do this and then plant without making mudslide. Again, I would like rely on grasses, but then also going heavy with your mulch, whether it be straw after you plant, and then over time, obviously, your plants are going to fill in, and then just leave that vegetative mass because it will produce a natural matting. As long as you're keeping that soil covered, you should be able to keep it in check. And I think I believe that's all the questions on the sheet.
Let's do some drawings. If your name is drawn, please come up and choose your gift.
Okay, so the first one we have is R.C. Swartz.
You can go.
Do you want me to go ahead? Okay. Okay, the second winner is Deborah Parrott.